Everybody thinks getting rich in the market comes down to one thing, and that's picking the right stock. And I get why. That's the story that we've all been sold. Every movie about Wall Street shows the same guy. He spots the next big thing before anybody else, bets it all, and he is rich on a beach at 35. So great story, but the numbers tell a different one. Because here's what actually happens when people try to pick winners. There's actually a famous study out of Arizona State that looked at every US stock going all the way back to 1926. Nearly 100 years of data. And it found that most individual stocks didn't beat the boring treasury bill. Basically cash, not the market, cash. And it gets crazier. Just 4% of the stocks were responsible for essentially all the wealth the entire market has ever created. 4%. Everything else on average was a wash. So think about what that means. When you buy one stock, you are not flipping a coin. The odds are actually stacked against you. Now I know what you might be thinking. Okay, Ron, that's for regular people. The pros know what they're doing. I would say, do they? Over any 15-year stretch, roughly 9 out of 10 professional fund managers, people who do this full time with teams and terminals and research budgets, fail to beat a simple S&P 500 index fund 9 out of 10 times. So if the pros can't reliably pick winners, what chance does a guy chasing stock tips on his phone really have? While everyone's out hunting or looking for that next big thing, there's a quiet group of people actually hitting 7 figures. Right now at just one company, Fidelity, there are over 600,000 people sitting on $1 million retirement account. And you know what almost none of them did? Pick stocks. The average one is around 59 years old and they just quietly fed the same boring account for 25 years. That's it. They didn't need to be smart. They needed to be consistent. So today, I'm going to show you 3 boring ETFs behind that kind of wealth. The one that created more millionaires than any hot stock ever has. And I'm going to show you exactly why they work with real numbers on this whiteboard. Quick disclaimer, none of this is financial advice. I'm just a guy on YouTube with the mic. So always do your own research before you invest. And this video took a ton of work to put together. If you find any value whatsoever, please hit the like button. It helps me more than you know. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we even give you the 3 funds, I need you to understand why this actually works and why we are focusing on ETFs and not individual stocks for this. Because if you don't get this part, the rest of the video doesn't really land. So let's draw this out. On the left, we have a box, and on the right we have a box. Okay, the blue dot represents a single stock. We can call this Apple. Here's what happens when you own one stock. If the company drops 50%, you are down 50%. Full stop. There's no cushion. There's nothing else absorbing the hit for you. And this is what most people don't want to hear. Most individual stocks actually underperform the overall market. Study after study on this shows the same thing, that large individual stocks lose money over the long run or barely break even. It is a small minority of companies that end up driving almost all of the market's actual gains, which means when you pick one stock, you are betting that you identify that rare winner ahead of time. Most people cannot. Professional fund managers with the research teams cannot. So don't feel bad. One bad earnings call, one bad product launch, one bad CEO decision, and years of gains get wiped out in a single afternoon. Now on the right, we have an ETF, which represents a basket of stocks or a basket of companies. An ETF is just a basket, and instead of one company, you're holding hundreds of companies at once. So if one of those companies blows up, you barely feel it because it is one dot out of hundreds. And here's a part that's actually super underrated feature of an ETF. When, let's say, a company, say these are companies that are outside other companies, say that one of these companies inside the fund, the ETF fund, let's say they underperform. What happens in this case is eventually it's going to get removed and it's going to get replaced by another company. So it eventually gets removed and replaced with a stronger one. This happens automatically. You do not have to do anything. The index itself is consistently upgrading its own roster behind the scenes. So think about it this way. With a single stock, you are betting on one horse, hoping that it does not get injured. With an ETF, you own an entire stable of horses, and the stable manager swaps out any horse that stops performing. That's the difference right there. The entire reason boring wins. Diversification is doing the hard work for you completely free. So now let's talk about 3 specific ETFs that actually do this. So the first one is VOO, and this is the fund that basically everybody should start with. VOO tracks the S&P 500, so you're getting ownership in America's 500 biggest companies in one single purchase. The expense ratio is 0.03%, and that means for every $10,000 that you have invested, you are paying $3 a year, and that's basically nothing. And here's a fact that I love sharing. This is a fund that Warren Buffett told told his own wife to put her money into after he is gone. Not individual stocks, not some complicated strategy, a simple S&P 500 index fund. If the greatest investor of all time is telling the person that he loves the most to just buy the boring index, that should tell you something. The current dividend yield on VOO is around 1.1%, so it is not really an income fund. This is your foundation. This is the one that everybody starts with. And honestly, for a lot of people, this alone could be your entire portfolio. Okay, so for the second fund is SCHD, and I like to call this one the Paycheck fund. SCHD tracks the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index. So it holds around 103 high quality companies that have a track record of paying and growing their dividends. It rebalances once a year, so it's constantly refreshing itself with the strongest dividend payers available. The expense ratio is 0.06% and the current yield is around 3.3%. So here's what makes this one special. It pays you while you wait. Every quarter, cash shows up in your account, whether the market is up or down that day. And if you reinvest those dividends now, while you are still building your portfolio, and then eventually switch to living off of them later, that is a real powerful transition. And there's one more thing that I want you to know about SCHD. The dividend itself has actually been growing to close to 10% a year on average over the last decade. So it's not just paying you today, it is paying you more and more every single year without adding another dollar. Think of SCHD as the fund that eventually replaces your paycheck. And for the third fund, we're going to do QQQM. This is the growth engine. QQQM tracks the NASDAQ 100, so this is heavily weighted toward technology and innovation. Around 51% tech with companies like Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, Broadcom. The expense ratio is 0.15% and the current yield is only 0.5% because these are growth companies, not dividend companies. So I want to make sure I position this correctly. VOO and SCHD are your defense, steady, diversified, reliable. QQQM is your offense. So it's higher risk, but a higher ceiling too. And one quick note is that QQQM is basically cheaper long-term twin of QQQ. So it has the same holding, same strategy, but QQQ charges 0.2% while QQQM only charges 0.15%. So you're buying the same holdings, but QQQM is simply a smarter version of the same fund. Now, one honest thing that I need to point out is that most people making these videos won't tell you this. VOO and QQQM overlap a lot because the biggest companies in NASDAQ are also the biggest companies in the S&P 500. So Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon. In fact, around 84% of what's inside QQQM is also inside VOO. So when you buy both, you're not tripling up on diversification, you're actually concentrating a little harder on big tech. That's not a bad thing if that's what you want, but you should know what's going on. QQQM is not a different bet from VOO. It is a stronger dose of the same bet. So there you go. VOO is the foundation, SCHD is your paycheck, and QQQM is your growth engine. Three funds that is genuinely the whole portfolio for a lot of people. Now you're probably wondering, okay, Ron, how do I actually split my money across these three? There's not a single right answer for this, and it really just depends on your age and how much risk you are comfortable with. But there's a simple way to think about it. The younger you are, the more you can lean on VOO and QQQM for growth because you've got decades for the market to do its thing. The closer you're actually to needing the money, the more SCHD starts to make sense for that steady income. One common starting point that a lot of people use is 50% VOO, 30% SCHD, and 20% QQQM. Foundation, paycheck, growth. That's not a rule, it's a starting point. Turn the dials to fit your situation. If you want more growth, lean into QQQM. If you want more income and stability, then lean into SCHD. And another thing that matters a lot more than people realize, it's not just which funds you buy, it's what kind of account you hold them in. If you hold these inside a Roth IRA, your growth and your withdrawals in retirement can be completely tax-free. That is massive. And it matters most for SCHD because those dividends pays out every quarter. In a regular brokerage account, it gets taxed on those every single year, even if you reinvest them. And that's a drag on your returns that most beginners never really think about. So it's important to do this in a smart order. Max out your Roth IRA first, and then anything above that can go into a regular brokerage account. I'm not a tax advisor, and this isn't tax advice, but it is absolutely worth looking into for your own situation because it can save you a serious amount of money over the long term. Okay, so now let's look at the numbers because I do not I want you to just take my word for it. Let's say you invest $500 a month split across these 3 funds and you do it consistently for 30 years. And let's assume a reasonable long run blended return of around 9% a year across all 3 funds together. I want to be really clear here. This is a projection based on historical averages. It is not a promise. The market does not move in a straight line. Some years will be up 25%, some years will be down 20%, but over a long enough period, this is a reasonable estimate of where things tend to land. So $500 a month, roughly 9% annually for 30 years, comes out to somewhere around $825,000, not adjusted for inflation. Now push the same $500 a month out for 35 years and it lands closer to 1.3 million. That is not from picking the next Nvidia 5 years before everyone else. That is not trying to get the perfect entry point. This is from 3 boring, unglamorous, low-cost funds on autopilot for decades without touching them. And here's the part that I really think drives this home. Almost nobody who actually built real wealth in the market did it by just picking the one stock that went up 1,000%. They did it by owning the whole market, and the whole market going up 9 or 10% a year for a really, really long time. It's just time, consistency, and getting out your own way. And here's how you actually make this happen so you never have to think about it. Because being consistent sounds nice, but life gets busy and motivation fades. So you take yourself out of the equation. So set up reoccurring buy so that the money invests itself every day, every month automatically. Then turn on dividend reinvestment. It's called DRIP, so that every payout of SCHD and VOO sends automatically to buy more shares without you having to do anything. Any major brokerage does this. Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard lets you do both of these for free, and they let you buy fractional shares. So even though one share of VOO is a few $100s, your whole 500 still goes to work fully invested in each bucket. Nothing sits in cash. You set it once and then you walk away. So look, everybody wants to find the next big stock, and I understand why. It's exciting, and in some cases it can work really well, but the actual data is not close. The people hitting the 7 figures are not stock pickers most of the time. They are the ones who bought a handful of boring index funds and simply refused to touch them for 15, 20, 30 years. VOO for your foundation, SCHD for your paycheck, and QQQM for your growth engine. Automate it, leave it alone, let boring do what boring has always done. Drop a comment, which one of these do you already own? I read every single one. I'm Ron. I appreciate every one of you for watching and for the support. Drop a fire emoji if you're still watching, and subscribe for more videos like this, and watch this video next on ETFs. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.